Book of Heaven, Volume 16, Part 13. April 8th, 1924. The crushing weight of the offenses of creatures. In the divine will, sleep also is an embankment for divine justice. The privations of my sweet Jesus continue, and I spend my days in a living purgatory. I feel I am dying, and I do not die. I call him, I rave, but in vain. I feel a tragic scene take place in my interior, such that, if it could be seen externally, even the stones would be moved to pity and would melt into tears. But alas, no one is moved to pity for me, not even that very Jesus who used to say he loved me so much. But as I was at the peak of my pains, my beloved Jesus, my life, my all, moved in my interior, and forming a cradle with his arms, rocking me, said, "Rock-a-bye, my daughter, sleep in the arms of your Jesus. Rock-a-bye, my little one." And in seeing that after falling asleep I would wake up again, he repeated, "Rock-a-bye, my daughter." So unable to resist, unwilling and crying, I fell into a deep sleep. Then, after hours and hours of sleep, without being able to wake up, my sweet Jesus, holding me tightly, leaned on the place of my heart, letting me feel an enormous weight that crushed me. But in spite of this, I could not wake up. Oh, how many things I would have wanted to tell him, but my sleep prevented me. Then, after much struggling between vigil and sleep, I saw that my good Jesus was suffering very much, so much as to be as though suffocated amid pains. And I said to him, "My love, you suffer very much, to the point of suffocating, but then you want me to sleep? Why don't you let me suffer together with you? And if you want me to sleep, why don't you sleep together with me?" And Jesus, all afflicted, told me, "My daughter, the offenses they give me are so many that I feel I am being drowned with pains. And if I wanted to share them with you, you would not be able to endure and remain alive. Don't you feel the weight that they give me, to the point of crushing me? That is such that, since I am within you, it is inevitable for me to share it with you. And if I wanted to sleep together with you, my justice would pour out freely against man, and the world would roll." And as he was saying this, Jesus closed his eyes, and it seemed that the world was rolling, and all created things were going out of the order of creation. The water, the fire, the earth, the mountains, and so forth, were jumbling together, and becoming homicidal and noxious for man. Who can say the great troubles that were happening? Taken by fright, I cried out, "Jesus, open your eyes! Do not sleep! Don't you see how all things are jumbling and putting themselves in disorder?" And Jesus again, "Have you seen, my daughter? I cannot sleep. I just closed my eyes, and if you knew how many evils occurred, For you it is necessary to sleep, that I may not see you succumb completely. However, know that I place you in the center of my will, so that your sleep also may be an embankment for my justice, that justly wants to pour out against man. April 11th, 1924. Scenes of chastisements. Jesus does not force anyone, but moves on when the soul is not ready to let him in, just as he did with the people of Bethlehem at his birth. I continue to feel dazed and sleepy. My powers no longer understand anything, and if I comprehend anything at all, in some moment of break, of vigil, then I feel a shadow around me, which overshadowing me completely, deep into my inmost fibers, makes me long and yearn for the holy will of God. Oh, how I fear that I might go out of his most holy will. Now, troubled as I was by the chastisements that Jesus had talked to me about, and by the sight of the turmoil of created things, I also heard from some people of the great evils that occurred during these last days in several parts of the world, up to the destruction of entire regions. But as I was hearing this, my Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, this is nothing yet. We shall go further in purifying the face of the earth. I am so disgusted in looking at it that I cannot bear the sight of it." I remained oppressed more than ever, and the horrible picture of the turmoil of nature, which I had seen in the past days, became alive before my mind. Then, going back to prayer, according to my usual way, I said to my lovable Jesus, "Since you are determined to lay hand to chastisements, and I can no longer do anything, either suffer or have people spared the evils they deserve. You could free me from this state of victim, or suspend me for some time. At least I would spare others the bother." And Jesus, "My daughter, I do not want to displease you. If you want me to suspend you, I shall do it." And I, fearing that I might do my will, immediately added, "No, no, my love, you should not say to me, 'If you want,' but rather you should say, 'I am he who wants to suspend you from this state.' It should not come from my will, but from yours. Then would I accept. So, not to make me content, but to let your will be done in me." And Jesus again, "I do not want to displease you. I want to make you content. If you want me to suspend you, I shall do it. However, know that my justice wants to follow its course, and you and I must surrender in part. There are certain rights of justice that one cannot do without. But since I have placed you in the center of my will, in this state of victim, even if you should now sleep, now suffer, now pray, it is always an embankment for my justice, to prevent the course of the almost total destruction of things. In fact, this is not about only chastisements, but about destruction. However, know that I do not want to force you. I have never liked force, so much so that when I came upon earth and wanted to go and be born in Bethlehem, I went, yes, knocking at door after door, to have a place in which to be born. but I did not force anyone. Had I wanted to, with my power, I could have used force in order to obtain a place less comfortable in which to be born, but I did not want it. I contented myself with only knocking and asking for shelter, and without insisting, I moved on to knock at other doors. And since no one wanted to receive me, I contented myself with going to be born in a grotto, in which animals gave me free entrance and did the first adorations for their Creator, rather than forcing anyone to let me in. However, this refusal cost the people of Bethlehem very much, because they never again received the good that my souls would trade upon their lands, or of seeing me in their midst again. I like spontaneous things, not forced ones. I like for the soul to make what I want her own, and as though it were hers and not mine, to give me what I want, freely and with love. Force is for slaves, for servants, and for those who do not love. This is why, just as with those people of Bethlehem, I move on from those souls who are not ready to let me enter into them and to give me full freedom to do whatever I wanted with them. On hearing this, I said, "My love, Jesus, no, I do not want to be forced, but freely I want to remain in this state, even at the cost of mortal pains. And you, never leave me, and give me the grace to always do your will." April 23rd, 1924. The state of profound sleep of Luisa continues. Together with Jesus, she suffers the crushing weight of the world. How to know when it is Jesus that gives one suffering, or the devil? I spend my days in bitterness and in the privation of my sweet Jesus, with the addition of a profound sleep, such that I myself do not know where I am or what I am doing. I feel the shadow of my Jesus around me. That puts me as though into an iron shirt, that renders me immobile, takes life away from me, and dazes me, and I no longer understand anything. What a sorrowful change in my interior! I, who did not know what sleep was, and even if a light sleep would surprise me, even while sleeping, I would not lose the attitude of my interior. I was aware of the fibers of my heart, of my thoughts, in order to give them back to Jesus, who so much loved me, to accompany him in all the hours and pains of his passion. Or I would wander within the immensity of his will, to give back to him everything, and those acts that he wanted from all creatures. And now, everything is over. My Jesus, what bitter pains! What a sorrowful sea you want my poor soul to navigate! Oh, please, give me strength. Do not leave me. Do not abandon me. Remember that you yourself said that I am little, or rather the littlest of all, just newly born. And if you leave me, if you do not help me, if you no longer give me strength, the newborn shall certainly die. Now, while I was in this state, I thought to myself, who knows whether it is the devil that forms this shadow over me, and puts me in this state of immobility. But as I was thinking this, I felt crushed more than ever under an enormous weight. And my lovable Jesus, moving in my interior, showed himself placing the edge of a wheel upon me that he was carrying, and all afflicted said to me, "My daughter, patience. This is the weight of the world that crushes us. Yet one single edge leaning on you serves me so as not to end it with the whole world." Ah, if you knew how many deceits, how many frauds, how many evils they commit, and how many hidden machinations of ruin they are plotting to be ruined more among themselves, that increase even more the weight upon my shoulders, to the point of making the scale of divine justice overflow. This is why there shall be great evils throughout the whole earth. And besides, why do you fear that it might be the enemy that puts you in this state? When it is the enemy that makes one suffer, he casts desperation, impatience, and disturbances. On the other hand, when it is I infuse love, patience, and peace, light, and truth. Do you perhaps feel impatient, desperate, that you fear it might be the enemy? And I? No, my Jesus. On the contrary, I feel as though plunged into an immense and deep sea, your will. And my only fear is that I might go out of the abyss of this sea. But while I fear, I feel its waves rising more powerfully over me, plunging me even deeper. And Jesus, and this is why the enemy cannot get close, because the waves of the sea of my will, while plunging you into the abyss of it, maintain the guard and keep even the shadow of the enemy far away. In fact, he knows nothing of what the soul does and suffers in my will, nor does he have the means, the ways, or the doors to be able to enter into it. On the contrary, it is the thing which he abhors the most. And if sometimes my wisdom manifests something of what the soul does in my will, the enemy feels such rage as to feel his infernal pains being multiplied, because my will, loved and fulfilled in the soul, forms paradise, while not loved and not fulfilled, it forms hell. Therefore, if you want to be safe from any diabolical snare, take to heart my will, and living continuously in it. May 9th, 1924. The chastisements shall serve to purify the earth, so that the divine will may reign on it. In the soul who lives in the divine will, Jesus finds the honors and decorum which he found in his humanity when he was on earth. I spend my days in the most profound bitterness and in deep silence on the part of Jesus, and with the almost total privation of his lovable presence. These are unspeakable pains that I feel, and I believe it is better to pass over them in silence, so as not to embitter my hard martyrdom even more. Then, after much struggling, this morning, blessed Jesus made himself seen in my interior, as he was filling me completely with himself, and I, surprised by his unexpected presence, wanted to lament to Jesus about his privation, but he did not give me the time to do it, and all afflicted told me, "My daughter, how embittered I feel! Creatures have put 3 nails into me, not into my hands, but into my heart and breast, that give me pains of death. They are preparing 3 conspiracies, one uglier than the other, and in these conspiracies they are taking aim at my church. Man does not want to surrender an evil. On the contrary, he wants to precipitate his race more." And while saying this, he showed secret meetings in which they were plotting how to assail the church, some how to cause new wars, and some new revolutions. How many horrifying evils could be seen! And my sweet Jesus resumed his speaking. "My daughter, is it not right for my justice to arm itself against man, to strike him and almost destroy the many lives that dirty the earth, and to make entire regions disappear together with them, so that the earth may be purified of so many pestiferous lives, and of so many incarnate devils, which, disguised under a thin veil of apparent good, are plotting ruins for the church and for society? Do you think that my absence from you is something trivial? No, no, on the contrary, the more prolonged my absence is from you, the graver the chastisement shall be. And then remember how many things I have told you about my will. So the evils, the destructions, shall serve to fulfill what I have told you, that my will come to reign upon earth. But it wants to find the earth purified, and in order to purify it, destructions are needed. Therefore patience, my daughter, and never go out of my will, because everything that takes place within you shall serve for the work, that my will may have its dominion to come as though in triumph to reign in the midst of men." At this speaking of Jesus, I remained resigned, yes, but highly afflicted. The thoughts of the grave evils of the world and of his privation are like a double-edged knife that kills me, and to my greater torment does not make me die. Then on the following morning, my sweet Jesus made himself seen in my interior, as though sunken deep inside, and he told me, "My daughter, I am posted within you, and from inside of you I look at what the world is doing. In you I find the air of my will, and I feel I can be there with the decorum that befits my person. It is true that my will is everywhere, but oh, how different it is for it to be life of the creature, and for the creature to live in it. In the other points, my will, in the midst of creatures, finds itself isolated, offended, unable to carry out the goods it contains, and to form a life all from itself and for itself. On the other hand, wherever I find a creature who offers herself to wanting no other life but my will finds company. It is loved. It carries out the goods it contains, and enjoys placing them in common with the soul, so as to form a life from itself and for itself. and in finding my own things in the soul, that is, my sanctity, my light, and my very will acting in her, I find myself with honors and decorum, just as I was in my humanity when I was on earth, in which my divinity, living within it, was as though posted and covered with the garment of my humanity. In the same way, I cover myself with the garment of the soul who does my will. I live hidden within her as in my own center, and from inside of her I look at the evils of creatures, and I cry and pray for them. And in seeing that one from their stock has my will as life also on earth, how many evils and chastisements do I not hold back out of regard for her? How many times I am in the act of destroying them and of ending it with them because of the great evils they commit. But by just looking at you and looking at my will and its stronghold in you, I post myself again, and I abstain from doing it. Therefore, my daughter, patience, and let my will always have complete life in you. May 13th, 1924. True adoration consists in the complete accord of the union of the will of God with the soul. The true and perfect model of adoration is the Most Holy Trinity. One flight of the soul in the divine will is enough for Jesus to fill all her involuntary voids of love. I was doing my usual prayers, and while abandoning all of myself in the arms of the Supreme Will, in it I intended to do my adorations of the Divine Majesty. And my Jesus, moving in my interior, took my poor soul in his arms, and raising it between heaven and earth, adored with me the Supreme Being. And then he said to me, "My daughter, true and perfect adoration is in the complete accord of the union of the will of God with the soul. The more the soul makes her will one with that of her Creator, the more complete and perfect her adoration is. And if the human will is not one with the divine, even more if it is far away from God, it cannot be called adoration, but shadow or colorless shade, which leaves not even a trace. And if the human will is not disposed to receive the kiss of the union of the Supreme Will, instead of adoration, it can be insult and scorn. The first act of adoration is to recognize the will of her Creator in order to do it. If this is not there, she adores with words, but in fact, she insults and offends. And if you want to know the true and perfect model of adoration, come with me into the midst of the three divine persons. I don't know how. Jesus clasped me more tightly and raised me higher into the midst of an unending light. I felt myself being annihilated, but my annihilation was overtaken by a divine life that unleashed from itself many different tints of beauty, of sanctity, of light, of goodness, of peace, of love, and so forth, in such a way that my nothingness was transformed by those divine tints to the point of no longer being recognized, and of enamoring the very one who had so much embellished me. And my sweet Jesus resumed his speaking. See, my daughter, the first act of the divine persons is the perfect accord of our will Our will is so unified that the will of one cannot be distinguished from that of the other. So much so that even though our persons are distinct, because we are three, our will is one, and this one will produces a continuous act of perfect adoration among the divine persons. One adores the other. This accord of will produces equality of sanctity, of light, of goodness, of beauty, of power, of love, and establishes in us the true reign of order and of peace, giving us immense joys and happinesses, and infinite beatitudes. So, the accord of the human will with the divine is the first link of connection between creator and creature, and from it, the divine virtues descend into her as within a channel, producing in her true adoration and perfect love for her Creator. And rising from within that same channel of connection, she receives the different tints of the divine qualities. And every time the soul rises in order to dive into this eternal will, she is embellished by and acquires as many more varieties of divine beauty. This is why I say that the soul who does my will is my amusement and my contentment. And in order to amuse myself, I keep the brush of my will in my hands. And as she dives into my will, I touch her up, and I amuse myself by impressing on her, with a brush stroke of mine, one more shade of my beauty, of my love, of my sanctity, and of all my qualities. So for me, being in her and being in heaven are the same. I find the same adoration of the divine persons, my will, my love. And since there is always something that can be given to the creature, I act now as a skillful painter, and I portray my image in her. Now as a teacher, and I teach her the highest and most sublime doctrines. Now as a passionate lover, giving and wanting love. In sum, I use and perform all my arts to amuse myself with her. And when my love, offended by creatures, finds no place in which to take refuge, in which to find escape from those who chase me to give me death, or force me to set off to the vault of the heavens, I take refuge in the soul who contains my will within herself, and there I find my power that defends me, my love that loves me, my peace that gives me rest. I find everything I want. Therefore my will connects everything together, heaven and earth and all goods, and it makes them one. And from this alone derive all possible and imaginable goods. So I can say that the soul who does my will is the all for me, and that I am the all for her. Then my lovable Jesus withdrew into the depth of my heart, and he disappeared from me. I remained comforted, yes, strengthened, but prey to the sorrow of having been left without him, and of having told him not even a word about my hard state. Ah, yes, when one is with Jesus, the soul flatters herself that she shall possess him forever, and she feels need for nothing. All troubles disappear, and with Jesus all goods enter the field. But as he withdraws, the troubles come back, and the pain of his privation sharpens its edge even more. That ripping her poor heart open without pity renders her pain ever new and more intense. In the meantime, my Jesus appeared again, and told me that he had his heart all wounded, as by 1,000 punctures. And he said to me, "My daughter, it is you who made these wounds to my heart. As you were calling me, you were wounding me. As you would remember that you were without me, you would repeat the wounds. And as you would suffer because of my privation, you would add yet more wounds." On hearing this, I said, "My love, if you knew how my heart bleeds because of you, and how wounded and embittered I feel it because of your privation, to the point that I can take no more. So I feel it more wounded than you do." And Jesus, let us see then who has more wounds, whether you or I. So Jesus visited the interior of my soul, and then he made the comparison between himself and me, to see who had more wounds, whether I or Jesus. To my surprise, I saw that Jesus had more wounds than I did, although I had quite a few. And Jesus continued, "Have you seen how I am more wounded than you are? However, know that there are various voids of love because of my privation. But do not fear, for I shall take on the commitment to filling them, because I know that you cannot do what you do when you are together with me. So since it is not your will to form these voids of love, your Jesus shall take care of filling them. One flight I make you do in my will shall be enough to put us in accord in love, in such a way that, overflowing outside, this love shall flow for the good of our brothers. Therefore let me do, and trust me." You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 16, Part 13. Fiat.